More evidence of the growing crisis in social care. An ITV News investigation reveals that councils are not delivering the care they should to the vulnerable who need it most.
I mean, it must be degrading for him as well. He must feel insecure, totally insecure and vulnerable.
Also tonight, exclusive, Farah on Trump's travel ban and why he had to speak out.
Not fair, but it's what it is, and for me, strongly, that's what I put out there, is something wasn't right, it wasn't fair.
Crisis talks over Vauxhall. The business secretary heads to Paris to try to protect British jobs. And the remarkable robot helping autistic children to express their feelings to others.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. An ITV News investigation has uncovered more evidence of the growing social care crisis in England. In just a single week, nearly 9 out of 10 councils who responded admitted carers had failed to turn up to help, amounting to a total of 16,000 hours of missed appointments. It's mainly due to staff shortages, and it is distressing both for patients and their families. Rebecca Barry has this special report in the latest in our series, Who Cares?
We'll go through to the other room.
Okay.
During their retirement, Jane and Pete had planned to go travelling around Europe.
Okay.
But a stroke 3 years ago forced their world to shrink. Now Pete needs visits from carers 3 times a day to help him wash, dress and use the bathroom.
When he first came home, he had to have 2 carers, one at the front and one at the back.
But sometimes the carers don't turn up at all.
Nobody had been to take him to the toilet, so I just came home because he was dying to go to the loo. I mean, it must be degrading for him as well. He must feel insecure, totally insecure and vulnerable.
And he's not alone. An investigation by ITV News has found 88% of councils in England that responded did not deliver all of the social care they'd promised. During a single week last year, almost 16,000 hours commissioned by local authorities were not delivered. Oxfordshire Council didn't deliver more than 1,500 hours. That's 7% of the care they'd promised. Sometimes the care receiver might refuse a visit, but often it's down to care agency delays, staff shortages or sickness. And the pressure on families takes its toll.
I don't think I let myself think about myself too much because I think I've got to live in the moment. I mean, sometimes when I look to the future, I feel scared. What if I can't do what I need to do?
And there are many with similar fears. Right here in Jane's hometown of Grimsby, so we brought a group together to share their experiences.
You have to fight all of the time to get what it is you want.
You do the extras. You don't want to see your mother soiled.
The families pick up the slack all the time. We will continue to provide the care.
We cannot trust the care system.
North East Lincolnshire Council says it's working hard to improve care here, but local authorities right across the UK are struggling with budget cuts. Grimsby MP Melanie On is part of a committee carrying out an inquiry into adult social care.
We cannot have a situation in 2017 where people are left alone in their homes waiting for carers who perhaps don't turn up because they're too busy, that they can't get a drink, that they can't be helped to the toilet. It just doesn't provide the basic level of dignity that we all deserve.
Jane doesn't want much from the government.
Just care a bit more. See us as people and not as numbers.
Jane and Pete are determined to stay positive about the future. But for them and many others, that's getting harder.
It's very distressing, isn't it? And many people watching are going to be quite concerned about this, really worried about it. So what response, have any of you, actually had from the government?
Well, we've repeatedly asked for an interview with the Health Secretary or a Minister, but the Department of Health won't put anyone up. In fact, throughout our series in recent weeks on social care, we've requested 4 times, and each time it's been declined. The Department of Health did give us a statement saying that vulnerable people must get prompt, dignified care. The truth is that councils that don't deliver the care they've promised are failing in their duties under the Care Act. But as we've heard many times, local authorities are battling huge financial pressures because of the ageing population and cuts in funding from central government. So with the budget approaching, local authorities and people like the couple I met in Grimsby will be hoping that the Chancellor puts up the cash that they say these services desperately need.
Rebecca Barry, thank you. President Trump tonight said the people leaking classified information to the press should be ashamed of themselves. He said that even secret phone calls that he made were among the leaks. In an extraordinary news conference, Mr. Trump railed against what he called the out-of-control media, but insisted his under-fire administration was working like a finely tuned machine. Here's our Washington correspondent, Robert Moore.
In the last hour, President Trump has further escalated his extraordinary ongoing battle with America's media. He believes political opponents in news organizations are deliberately trying to undermine his presidency.
The press has become so dishonest that if we don't talk about it, we are doing a tremendous disservice to the American people. Tremendous disservice. We have to talk about it to find out what's going on, because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control.
In words that will strike many as almost absurd, given these tumultuous opening 4 weeks, he said his administration was working well.
I turn on the TV, open the newspapers, and I see stories of chaos. Chaos. Yet it is the exact opposite. This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine.
There are also damaging reports of his confrontation with intelligence agencies, with suggestions that CIA officers are so concerned that Trump himself has been compromised, they are not fully sharing their most sensitive secrets with him. And just look at how the president's view of leaked information has changed. This was Trump in October, when Hillary Clinton was the target.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
And then this was Trump today, in the cabinet room.
We're going to find the leakers. We're going to find the leakers. They're going to pay a big price for leaking.
Trump blames the leaks for forcing out his national security advisor, General Mike Flynn, a man who had a mysterious series of phone calls with the Russian ambassador and then lied to the vice president about the contents. Trump's performance in the last few minutes in the East Room will not end any of the questions, but will raise more about whether he has the character and the temperament to stabilize his presidency. Well, that press conference, which is still going on there in the East Room of the White House, was another extraordinary, highly combative and erratic performance by the president. He was finally asked in the last few minutes about Russia. He said that any links between him and Moscow are what he called fake news. He says he has no deals, no property, and no ties to Moscow. But look, he has described his administration as a finely tuned machine. It must be said to the rest of us, it certainly feels that those questions will continue and that there is here a degree of policy and political chaos we haven't seen before.
Robert Moore in Washington, thank you. Well, as President Trump once again defended his controversial travel ban, Mo Farah spoke for the first time about why he denounced it. The Somali-born Olympic champion told ITV News he feared he wouldn't be able to see his family who live in the United States. In an exclusive interview, Mo told Amy Lewis why he had to stand up for what's right.
What questions they might...
Smiling through what has been an uncertain few weeks, Mo Farah knows what it's like to unpick the confusion of a President Trump travel ban. At first, the Somalian-born athlete who lives in the United States thought the executive order applied to him.
26!
At the time, he was training in Ethiopia and didn't know if he could return to his wife and children in Oregon.
Recently, you've been speaking pretty strongly about Donald Trump and his travel ban. How do you feel about going back to the United States?
Yeah, no, it was important that I speak up, and at the time it did affect me, and it was one of the reasons speaking to my kids and not being able to see my kids, and with that it affected me. So it was important that I speak up and say what was right, and I believe that it was an unfair decision to suddenly being able to, country you've been there for 6 years and done everything right, overnight to tell you can't come back to see your kids is unfair.
Samo was not alone in his criticism of the travel ban, which prompted some to call for President Trump's state visit to the UK to be cancelled, but the government insists it will go ahead.
Okay, many celebrities and politicians have been against that. How do you feel about Donald Trump having a state visit to the UK?
I'm not really a politician, but at the same time, I said what I needed to say, and I just have to, continue my running. It's what it is, and for me, strongly, that's what I put out there, is something wasn't right, it wasn't fair.
Today, Samo was at the track that helped make his name, and which has now been named after him. He returns to the US next month, questioning how welcome he really is. Amy Lewis, ITV News.
Other news now, and members of the train drivers' union ASLEF have rejected a deal with Southern Rail. The union voted 54 to 46% against the deal. That could have ended their long-running dispute over driver-only trains. It means Southern passengers could face more strikes. A teenage girl has denied murdering 7-year-old Katie Ruff. She was found with severe injuries in a field close to her home in York last month. The 15-year-old defendant, who cannot be named, will face trial in July. Now, the Business Secretary is tonight heading for crisis talks in Paris over fears that thousands of British Vauxhall jobs could be lost. Greg Clark is meeting the head of Peugeot Citroën, which is planning a takeover of the struggling company. Earlier, Mr Clark sought assurances from the president of General Motors in Downing Street. And our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. Now, the unions fear this is only going to go one way, don't they?
Yes, they do. Look, a deal hasn't been done, Mary, but, General Motors is clearly looking at the possibility of offloading its business. It's in talks to that end. And if a deal is done, then PSA and PSA do take over, then there will be factory closures. And the concern is that 4,500 jobs at Luton and Ellesmere Port are at risk. Now, this morning, the president of General Motors, Dan Amann, came to the UK from Germany. He met with the business secretary, Greg Clark. Now, the minister afterwards said he was told by General Motors that he wanted to build on the success of Luton and Ellesmere, not to rationalise, close the plants. General Motors' statement was less enthusiastic, and Len McCluskey, the head of the Unite Union, who also met the president of GM, said, well, he had no such reassurances. The reason Ellesmere Port is vulnerable has nothing to do with the workforce. It's actually quite productive. The problem is 75% of the Astra cars that are built there are made from imported cars. That's not an efficient way to build a car, and the fact that we've voted to leave the European Union makes the situation there even more vulnerable. The slump in the pound is causing the business all sorts of problems. This is serious. Tonight, Greg Clark's in Paris meeting PSA and the French industry minister. The French government is the biggest shareholder, and they will not sign off a deal that leads to French job losses, Mary.
All right, Joel, thank you. Still to come on the ITV Evening News. Grot Spot Britain. We reveal the huge variation in what local authorities charge to remove our waste. And
how does he feel? Happy. Is he happy?
The robot helping autistic children become independent in a way that humans can't. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Now, all this week, we've been highlighting the growing blight of illegal fly tipping right across the UK and how councils are ramping up their charges for waste disposal. Hundreds of you have responded, sending us photos of rubbish dumped illegally near you. And in this, the latest part of Grot Spot Britain, our consumer editor Chris Choi has discovered a huge difference in the fees local authorities charge for waste removal. And there's a growing list of items that they simply won't take away.
Hundreds of people have sent us evidence. From across Britain, images have poured in, pinpointing the blight of fly tipping. And we were sent videos of shameful incidents. These suspects were caught on camera, but not yet caught by the authorities. This is what they left in a suburb of Liverpool. In many areas affected, like here in Manchester, there are calls to remove costs and restrictions from council dumps.
Fly tipping's increasing daily. The council want people to use the tips, but they're not doing it because they don't think they should be charged for removal of their waste.
Household waste recycling centre charges vary around the country. In West Sussex, soil costs £4 a bag to dump, much higher than Dorset at £1.50. Tyres cost £5 each to dump in Surrey. It's far less in Cornwall, £3.20. And rubble costs £4.70 a bag to get rid of in Norfolk, more than double Northumberland's £2 charge. This man can't dump his waste at the local tip at any cost. That's because he's a plasterer, and most council recycling centres ban trade waste, a restriction he says is counterproductive.
Me personally, I would never fly tip even under that kind of sort of duress or that situation. But I can understand that people that of that mindset that they would, if that happens to them, they'll just say, OK, I'm just going to tip it.
As they battle against this mess, councils say the recycling centres are for household waste, that budget pressures mean some charges are needed, and that there's no evidence they boost fly tipping. Like the rest of us, they're determined to stop those who make a tip out of our neighbourhoods. Chris Choi, ITV News.
And there is lots more online, including an interactive map, and that is at itv.com/news. Now, fortifying bread and milk with vitamin D could prevent millions of people catching chronic colds and even flu, and that's according to a new study. Known as the sunshine supplement, vitamin D is produced naturally by the skin when it's exposed to sunlight. But in autumn and winter, of course, levels drop, and many of us don't get enough of the vitamin from our diets. Sejal Karia reports.
People enjoying some rare February sun, but us Brits aren't getting enough of its rays to make the right levels of vitamin D in the winter. Important for healthy bones and teeth. And now it seems it can stave off colds and flu too, according to a new study. So those behind it advise taking supplements, especially children.
I think it's about letting them develop an immunity to those viruses, and that's the way I do. I wouldn't want to supplement them, particularly vitamin D, artificially.
My children don't really like to take any vitamins, so if it had been introduced in food, that'd be easy.
Actually, it's already naturally present in some foods, like oily fish such as salmon, red meats and eggs. Cereals and some spreads are fortified with it. But researchers behind today's findings say it should also be added to bread and milk so everyone can share the benefits.
The current recommendation is that people who require extra vitamin D buy over-the-counter supplements. Personally, I have my doubts about whether the general public are going to be motivated to do that. So I think that the way forward is to adopt a programme of fortification.
So what did researchers find? That 70% of people in the UK get at least one respiratory illness a year. That's cold, flu or even pneumonia. But they found regular vitamin D supplements could reduce that chance of infection by 12%, meaning 3 million fewer people would suffer every year. But some remain unconvinced fortifying food is the way forward.
What we really need is a very large randomised controlled study in the UK in a healthy population, and this study doesn't necessarily help us achieve that.
While the debate over fortification continues, it seems sunshine and supplements are the answer. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
And finally tonight, the remarkable robot that's helping children with autism to interact with humans. Zeno uses artificial intelligence to improve youngsters' communication skills. And as our science correspondent Alok Jha explains, it's hoped the children and the robot will actually learn from each other.
Zeno, how are you feeling today? How does he feel?
Happy.
Is he happy? How was he feeling that time? Was he happy, sad, angry or scared?
At this school for autistic children in London, the pupils have a new classmate. Zeno can make distinct facial expressions and encourages the children to copy him. For Harry, this isn't so easy.
Can you make a happy face? Yeah, beautiful happy face there.
Many children on the autistic spectrum can understand facial expressions, but can't always make their own to reflect how they feel. Zeno could help those children communicate better.
Robots in therapeutic settings might be particularly beneficial for autistic children because they potentially make them more comfortable in these settings. And if we get children who are more comfortable and less anxious, they might be more ready to learn.
Finding better ways to get the children to focus is a prime concern for the headmaster.
No 2 days are the same in autism, that's for sure. Where there are children who very often will not communicate because they see all people as the same. Sometimes with a puppet or a robot, we've seen some startling things where suddenly they're asking questions or they're responding to a stimulus that they know is not another human being, but you know, it just draws them out of their sort of normal way of communicating.
What is he doing now?
We're used to seeing robots that help automate our modern lives. But with Zeno, scientists want to go beyond that and develop robots and software that learn how to help individuals. These engineers are building an artificial intelligence into Zeno to turn the robot into a companion for children on the autistic spectrum.
This would be fantastic because the kids would actually have a constant trainer with them, a trainer that is playful, a trainer that they like, and a trainer that is very consistent and it's never upset with them or bored with them.
In early trials, they've already had tantalizing success.
Which one's good? That one's good.
Yeah,
right.
If Zeno works more generally, this robot could become a remarkable gateway to thoughts and emotions that these children have never been able to express before. Alok Jha, ITV News.
A remarkable story. And that is all for now. Tom Bradby's here with news at 10, but from me and all the team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.